observations. You had some comments about dreams. Nick Brink, are you there?
He's here, but he's muted right now.
Okay, going to Danny. Danny, if you could unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm back. Okay.
Oh, who is this? Is that Nick?
Nick, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead with my questions.
Yes, please.
I think first I was connected with my own perspective rather than the speakers. And I was thinking of time-free transparency is really applying to the spiritual, visiting the spirits and the ways of our ancestors. When I got out of my own perspective and started listening to him and realizing that he was speaking more in the present of what perspective and what transparency meant, he made a lot more sense to me. I was just stuck in my own perspective at first. I was thinking that talking from his perspective, it was much more linear. I think of the our origin of the I think of going back to our origin of the hunter and gatherers when they visited, when they listened to the spirits. That was much more non-linear. But when I stepped out of my own perspective that way, I think Miku made considerably more sense to me.
Did you pick that up, Al?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, can we look, there's one thing about the origin. I think language does a disservice. We say origin, there's an origin. When I mentioned about waiting for the future data from the past, the intersection of future and past says that the universe originates and is still originating. Origin is not something out of which things come, it originates. Otherwise, you have a static thing, there it sits and somehow causes. It itself creates and is self-creating. As the universe continuously, the universe is not finished. Well, it started then, now it's just going. It's still creating. The forces, the energies, the Shakti and Kama and Lila, playfulness, still originating. Stars are still originating, okay? So the origin is not a thing, it's originating. And we are co-actors in this origination. When we create, originate, we are with the originating origin. We're not somehow saying, well, the origin does it and now we are sitting here. We are part of the cosmic consciousness. It originates. Like I'm as opening up the dimension of far the galaxies, I'm originating an awareness, which is still originating then the data in course I'm looking for. So it's like Nietzsche said, you know, when he talked about Sphinx, and he said, and Sphinx. All of a sudden, the Sphinx is gone and the activity.
Okay.
And Sphinx, the dynamics of the origin.
Okay.
So we in the West, we're very static. In India, we have Shakti, cosmic energies. We have the Kama, cosmic eroticism. We have Lila, cosmic play. We are a conjunction of energies, sun included. When I say there's a sun, a thing, no, it just oozes of creating energies that are creating, dissipating, transforming. So the origin is not, I define an origin like a Hegelian something.
Yeah.
No.
So-
for Gebser.
Okay,
Otherwise,
thank
the integral would be like another structure imposed. Okay.
Nick, thank you for your question. Our next question comes from one of our presenters from last week, Dr. Karen Voorhees. Karen, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. I have not read all the philosophers you have, but I'm coming to this from having taken Jeremy's Gebser course twice in the last couple of years. I don't know if you can see, my copy is full of tabs and marks and so on.
Condolences.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So first, I want to, Algis, I want to clarify a point of your terminology, and then I'd like to dive into your atemporal, the whole concept of atemporal. Early on, you said, let's see, I think I have it up here in the note. You defined perspective in a narrow and very precise way, if I understood you. You defined perspective to our observation of things that exist physically. So I'm asking what term you would use for things that do not exist physically, like ideas that we might have different views on. Would you use the term point of view? Or because I'm about to ask you something.
Okay, I would, now I got into a habit of using a broader term, disclosing.
Disclosing.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
disclose the universe mathematically. We don't have
Disclosing.
mathematical perspective. I cannot stand, say, here's a perspective from mathematics. There's no such a thing. So disclosing, mathematics discloses the one dimension of the universe, the quantitative, measurable. And but you know, we can disclose the universe mythically. We can disclose the universe. What is that called? Religiously. So disclosure is,
Okay.
you know, my perspective. Disclose. I can use perspective as disclosing the side of a table. Okay.
Okay, so now how would I ask, in your terminology, how would I ask you, I'm coming at what you have presented today more from an Eastern Hindu Buddhist point of view that discloses to me the distinction between sat, absolute truth, versus relative truth. This is kind of the filter through which I'm hearing this, because I mean, I'm from my own meditation practice, I'm very comfortable with the idea that, like you said, history is not past, it is present atemporally. I think I got that correctly. Atemporally, that it's everything is present in that that instant.
There's no instant. It's present in depth.
Presence in depth, because it isn't even an instant is also in time. So presence in depth. And so that, to me, I'm interpreting through my filter of sat, absolute truth, ever-present origin that's constantly creating everything outside or out atemporally. But it seems to me we also need to, I'm going to hold up the opposite end just for fun to see what you say, that relative truth is also very important, because while we are in these physical bodies, we experience time temporally. And I must say that you folks are doing a magnificent job of keeping to the discipline of the temporal limits of your presentation. So you are tracking temporal time here in a very pragmatic way. So I want to hold up that there is relative truth as well as absolute truth. And I just love to hear what you have to say to that.
Okay. You mentioned the East and things like that. Well, I had a privilege way back before your parents were born to be in Japan, and I had a master, Zen. And so that to me is very profound. Now, I mentioned reflection. The world becomes self-aware through me, and I become self-aware through the world. Okay, so now give you an example. Again, I was teaching in Europe, and they gave me a little hotel room, and I usually get up pretty early, and there's always this young lady attendant, and I come down, and it's still dark, and oh, hey, professor, oh, please, sit down, I'll make you coffee. Okay, so one morning I came down, and she wasn't there, so I sat down on a little couch, and I was looking out the window. And she said, she came down 10 minutes. Oh, so sorry, I'm sorry you're left all alone. It must be so boring for you. I said, no. So what? Said, look. Well, what? Look. There's a little fog, and there's a little morning dawn, few sun rays. And notice how the fog condenses on a leaf into a little drop. And the drop then is pierced by the sun ray, and the drop finally rolls down the leaf. The wind sways it, and the drop breaks up into many drops, many sun rays. I am participating in the universe. The truth. That's there. And she said, I never seen that. I said, well, look at the world and you will be reflecting who you are. Okay. There is no need to say, well, I'm reflecting upon my own thoughts. The world thinks through you as you think through the world. And that's the truth. That's why, when we begin to impose our theories, our ideas, we miss the truth of the world.
So moving back to the temporal, we have 3 questions left, and just
one thing, David.
Yeah.
And that is, Al has a book From Zen to Phenomenology, which I edited an earlier version, and that really deals a lot of these issues. He's been around that lived world for a long time.
So,
yeah.
Ellen Cool, if you could unmute and briefly ask your question.
Hello, my question was sort of answered there about reflection. I wanted you to elaborate on it. And I'm just curious of your opinion, if you think it's possible for us to teach, guide, educate, whatever word you want to use, our young children to have an aperspectival ability with reflection of the world.
Yeah. Okay. First reflection. When a scientist, let's say comparative civilizations, or a historian, talks about, comparative requires a common framework, otherwise simply 2 different things, okay? Many comparative civilizations say, well, I'm comparing, well, India says this, and the West says that, and Maya says that. That's like saying there's potato, cucumber, and cabbage. 3 different things. Comparison requires a common integral framework. Okay, without that, there's no comparison. So now, when one does investigations of that sort, one enters a domain, but one doesn't notice that domain of reflection. You reflect upon language, reflect upon culture, reflect upon mathematics, but the domain in which you are, that allows you freely to range across many disciplines, many domains, is not known. What are we into when we reflect upon something and something else and something else? That region which allows us to reflect without any hindrance, without introducing any prejudices, is very strange. It's I call that transcendental, phenomenological, but the self that is involved in this reflection is not an ego, not a social construct. It is ever present. You cannot escape it, but once you try to define it, that vision of that reflective domain is gone. Well, I'm reflecting upon my own thoughts, Descartes. Well, who is this that does the reflecting upon his thoughts? But reflecting upon his thoughts, as for example, mathematical, is not reflecting upon his thoughts. It's reflecting upon mathematics. Anybody can do that. So the self that is not involved in saying, I am reflecting, is much broader than, like August says, when I reflect upon my soul, it is in excess of itself. It's much more than I can, in my own self-reflection, encompass. That dimension is philosophical. I call it cosmic reflection. I have a book in Lithuanian. I think I'll translate it into English. Cosmic consciousness.
Our next
Yeah.
question.
So now for the education. One thing about education, we are now, in fact, I'm forming a consortium of sorts to challenge the current global trend in education that is purely technical, okay, for jobs, that education is going to fail the whole humanity. And they say, why? Look, you get a job. Well, the technical education, I don't call it education, training, no matter how high you are, you're being trained for function, can serve anything. Hitler was, German technical scientists were the best in the world. Had Hitler started World War II 5 years later, he would have conquered the world because their technical scientists were the best. Everybody agreed. But they served a dictator. But they said, well, we're scientists. We're nothing to do with anything. We're just doing the job. In short, that kind of training can serve anything. Dictators, tyrants. The scientists said, it's none of my business what they do with my new weapons. So that education is going to fail humanity. We don't offer education which says, let's think about everything in principle and critically. Thinking in principle requires pushing every thesis to the limit. What is a human being? What is to be a human being? Not that I serve a dictator or don't give a damn what I serve. And that is why the migration of people, I have some papers called the nomadic civilization. The technical experts are nomadic. They can go anywhere, serve anything. As long as they get paid, they have laboratories, they can do anything for whatever government or whatever hires them. Remember in Cambridge, they're complaining that the best technical minds are going to China because China provides more money for them. Despite the fact that China, their inventions are used to control people, to oppress people. It's none of my business. I'm a scientist. See, that training is failing education. Okay? We have to have education as a school where every thesis is philosophical and every thesis is to be contested, because every thesis, whether it's a higher science, is offered by fallible humans. First philosophical move in the West was recognition that we are fallible in principle. Therefore, we can discuss in the open every proposal, no dogmas, whether it's coming from divine sources, coming from Plato or coming from anybody else. We can contest them. We can search for truth beyond any dogma. Okay. dogmas can be mistaken. And that is why that education, which says the teacher, the teacher is authority. But the authority, once I reach that level of understanding that I'm being taught, I can challenge that authority and myself. Then I'm responsible.
So we have less than 10 minutes left in this session, and we have lots of remaining questions. So what I will likely do, Algis and Mike, is I will email you the questions that we can't ask right now, and you'll be able to have a chance to respond to these folks.
One more intersection. Anything you want, write to me.
Keep
I
going.
have in the background 2,000 papers. Okay.
Rebecca, who has a shaky internet connection, asked me to ask her question for her. So here it is.
She belongs to Shakers.
Could you say more about the soul's death pole? Gebser says, and this is a quote, "Then there are the potencies inherent in the soul, efficacies which unleash the energies of life and death."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see, okay, I mentioned, for example, that comes from Augustine. The soul is between eternity and time. Okay, and so in that case, the soul can choose time, and as Augustine says, can disperse itself across all shifting phenomena, or can concentrate and become one with changeless being. It is that swinging between. It is like at a transcendental level of awareness, pure and simple. There are two dimensions in which we live all the time, and that is permanence and change. And change can be anything. Change can be very static, very permanent, okay? Like the physical laws of change never change, okay? Can be very static. So, but the awareness that when I discuss permanence and change is neither one. But I can shift to become totally permanent, dogmatic, or I can change to be totally loose and flowing, or I can disclose the possibility that change can be supported by permanence, and permanence is not absolute, or the absolute can totally suppress permanence. I mean, there are 7 variations, and we live them all. Okay? Like flow doesn't mean sequence. Things change in flux, but they don't have to have a direction. Okay? It's like my waiting. Now, exclude everything else, I'm waiting. I have no question, I'm waiting moment after moment after moment and things like that. I look at my watch, the second handle moves, second after second, but it doesn't move. It marks permanent waiting. I'm still waiting, I'm still waiting. Second after second, I'm still waiting. Nothing changed, despite the fact that the little handle moved. So I'm marking permanence through all the changes that are also permanent. So here's permanence marking permanence, okay? I'm stuck. So I have papers on that across civilizations, okay? How people manage. Remember what made Hitler win? Totally in the background. Germany was in trouble. Everything was changing. Everything was in turmoil. And Hitler said, I will give you the never changing pole which gives your life meaning. I'll give you total permanence, total order, 1,000 years, no changes. Germans fell for it. Yeah, hey, der Führer, whatever he says.
So as we bring this session to a close, I wanted to jump in to Ellen's question and say that there are two Gebserians that I know of. I'm sure there are more, but there are two that I know of who have written specifically about the role of integrality and Gebserian thought in education, primarily the education of children. And those two people are Bernie Neville, who was at the La Trobe University in Australia. They actually hosted our conference one year, which was wonderful. And the other is Robert Mitchell, who is working, I'm told, on a new book about this. And Robert, some of you may know, has presented a couple of years in a row at Gebser. He presented when we were at Asilomar, which may have been our last actual face-to-face meeting. And he presented, I think, one time before that. But both Bernie and Robert have written about the radical ways in which the educational system needs to be reimagined in order to make it an integral kind of approach. So
Yeah.
Again, I hate to cut this short, but I know that we have not only the speakers in this block this morning, but then we're going to break and have the Cosmo locals. And I know for some people, it's getting very late. Walter, I don't know what time it is right now in Germany, but I know that to respect it, I want to make sure that we move along. So, Tom, I don't have book titles handy, but I'll try to get them for you. So I want to thank Algis for being with us back to back in 2 sessions. And again, for everything that you have done over the decades to bring Gebser scholarship to all of us. I have a photo album over the years of you and I drinking beer in various places around the world.
Now you're talking my language.
And so, you're getting older. I'm not changing at all. I don't know what's happening. But and I want to thank you, Mike, for this wonderful conversation that you had with Algis. And Eric Kramer is on deck. And before I turn it over to Eric, I'd like to introduce Eric really briefly. Eric didn't give me a bio, so I'm going to wing this. So Eric Kramer is probably the most published scholar on Gebser scholarship, at least in the English language, is directly and indirectly responsible for the propagation of Gebser scholarship across the world, has written or been the book editor for I don't know how many books on Gebser, has lowered his standards to allow me to appear in at least one of them. And, in terms of lineage, this is, I think, an important thing to understand, that Algis was one of Eric's mentors. Eric was one of my mentors. And my signature appears on at least one dissertation for someone else in the crowd of presenters for this year's conference. And so we are very, very fortunate to have this conversation about the origins of this organization continue. And just as it did in real life from Algis to Eric, it does so in the form of presenters. So I welcome my buddy and mentor, Eric Kramer.
Hello, everybody. First, an announcement. I just got a call from my agent, and I've been selected to be the new James Bond. So that's pretty exciting.
To handle all the ladies.
Beat you out. I beat you out for the role. They were looking for a really old, slow white man, and I fit the bill. Better than you. They're always old, slow white men, aren't they? So a couple of things I wanted to say real quick. The Gebser archive is housed in the History of Science collections here at OU. And I was reminded of that when Al just talked about the tape that he received from Madame Gebser. because he gave me that tape when I was in Virginia years ago, and I took it to an audio engineer that I knew, and we tried to digitize it and clean it up because it was literally the last words, not simply the last words recorded by Gebser, but they were his last words as he was expiring because he was dying of asthma and could barely breathe. So the tape was very difficult to understand. So we tried to clean it up. And that tape, when Algis gave it to me, I felt like I was carrying a holy relic. And he made it very clear, do not lose this tape, do not damage it, do not erase it. So that there is a digitized, cleaned up copy and the original in the archive here at OU, right next to Newton's Principia Mathematica with his personal notes in the margin, and Darwin's personal copy of Origin of Species. And the History of Science collection here at OU is quite spectacular. It's several people who teach the history of science at Harvard, Princeton, Yale got their PhDs at Lowly, Oklahoma. Why? Because some very, very rich oil men bought everything after World War II, when so many libraries and universities had been destroyed, and brought them back. And so they are in safekeeping now, hopefully. Another thing I would just mention is that years ago, I've hosted Gebser a few times. And one year we had it here at OU, and I told the story of stealing the ever-present Origin from the publisher. And you can find that on YouTube. What was happening was I couldn't wait to get to the translation, and it's a long story, but anyway, the police showed up at my house, and then I showed up at Al's office, and I said, please don't have me arrested. I borrowed it overnight and made a copy and blew up the copying machine in the philosophy department. I borrowed it. I did not steal it. So that's how eager I was to read that. Now, normally I'm used to responding to papers that I get a chance to read ahead of time. This is a little bit different. As I was listening to Algis and Michael has been just a pillar of Gebser studies in North America for so long. Thank you, Michael. I want you to be dutifully recognized by me. I appreciate you so much. As I was listening to this, I was thinking of the guy who chaired my philosophy master's thesis, which was on, my thesis was that Buddhism crossed the Himalayas and it banged into Taoism, and that created Chan, which is transliterated into Japanese as Zen. That was my thesis, and it was chaired by Troy Organ. Dr. Organ had translated the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and some other things. And as I was listening to Algis and Michael, and they were talking about Origin, I was thinking exactly what Algis ended up saying. I remember Organ saying that the modern West thinks in nouns. Other cultures and languages think in verbs. And so there is no origin, it is originating. It is a process, I think, that is ever present. And to me, that is very optimistic in the sense that that also gives us the sense that we can always change. We always are changing, but so there are a couple of questions that I would like to put to Algis, and I'll try to sort of state these questions. Maybe Dave can sort of keep track of them, And then I'll shut up and I'll let Algis respond to my response or reflect on his reflection or something like that. As I was listening to it, and Mike will appreciate this, Merleau-Ponty was all over the place. The notion of the integrating of perspectives, and again, noun thinking instead of verb thinking. We're perspectivizing. We see things as these lockstep units, and because we're so quantitative in our thinking in the West, and we divide things, and that's the definition of precision for the West. Precision is fragmentation. So we take a day and we break it into hours, and we break the hours into minutes, and the minutes into seconds, and feet into inches, and meters, and so forth. And we fragment and fragment, and that gives us our sense of precision, and it gives us a sense of power that we are somehow getting a handle on things because we have dissected them so far down. So when I was thinking of Merleau-Ponty, of course, he's talking about as you walk around an object, it's not a sequence of perspectives. And what's always there, as he says brilliantly in The Visible and the Invisible, is implicature, the implied that is always present. So I appreciated that a lot from Algis's presentation. I was also thinking about his shots across the bow for postmodernism. And my thesis there is that postmodernism actually happened before modernism. That Heraclitus and Lao Tzu come before Plato and Confucius. That modernity is actually reactionary because these people were troubled by flux. So they tried to come up with this formalism, which Algis is skirting. He's skirting Platonic formalism quite a bit there, which a couple of people have already pointed out. And I appreciate that. So my first question to Algis, if Dave can sort of jot this down, I'll state a couple of questions and then I'll turn it back to Algis. One is Gebser is talking about a burgeoning consciousness, that something is changing, a mutation. And I'm thinking of Levinas. You were talking about human being, and I was thinking of Levinas and how he's kind of stretched that to Gaia, to all living things. That we should extend this respect and appreciation far beyond human beings to everything. But to be a little more technical with Algis, I was thinking about some discussions that Stephen Crowell and I and Algis used to have, and Jose and other people about passive synthesis and the constitutive process as a foundational sense, sort of a cosmic sense. And so my question is, if there is a burgeoning integral awareness, and I'll use the word awareness here, does that mean that our passive synthesis is fundamentally changing? And I'll let Algis answer that after I state a couple of other questions. That also brings me then to the issue of transparency and the noetic and the noematic. And this play off of form and content, contingency and flux, all of these dualities that we have been forced to live with in our Cartesian mentality. So I would like for you to talk a little bit about the transparency that allows case and category to be co-present at all times, and that leading to sense making and understanding. So and that brings me to the hermeneutic circle. And when I studied with Gadamer, we used to talk about verkungeschichtlich Bewusstsein, this notion of a historically conditioned historical awareness.
Effective question.
Yeah, this kind of constant integration, where, as Faulkner would say, the past is never past. But it's more complex than that. Dave, I hope you're helping me here.
I am typing dutifully.
I hope I'm making some sense. And then finally, you're talking in terms of vision, and again, awareness and consciousness are kind of drifting here, these ideas. And I was thinking about Husserl's concept of intentionality, and where the will is in this. Because one of the things that I think is a little ambiguous in Gebser is if there is a burgeoning new worldview, an integral worldview, that may become dominant. And I understand everything about, archaic, magic, mythic, perspectival, always already being present. But Gebser does give this sense that there's something emergent, a new form of disclosure, to use your language. And on one hand, he sort of suggests that we need to make this happen. On the other hand, he's sort of like, it's happening whether we want it to or not. It reminds me of Marx saying we have to have the revolution. And on the other hand, saying the revolution is a natural law and it will happen whether we want it to or not. So I was thinking about the Husserlian concept of intentionality that comes from Brentano, that can we willfully encourage this emergent view that may change some of our dualistic, some of the problems that are deriving from our dualistic thinking. A new form of disclosure, as you would say, a fundamentally new form of disclosure that I don't know may even be at the level of passive synthesis, if you're neo-Kantian and see structuration that way. So I will shut up and listen.
Me too. I'll shut up and listen. Silence is golden. Okay, Eric, what the hell? Let's start with Gadamer and Verschmelzung der Horizonte, the convergence of horizons. And this is the transcendental question that the big argument between Gadamer and Habermas, remember the called hermeneutical controversy. Now, in awareness, nothing else. Let's start with that. Gadamer's point is that our tradition, language, customs, always overflood us. Okay? It's more than us. So for example, when you go to a court and there are texts written in the past, but then suddenly a lawyer says, well, I will refer to Constitution. All of a sudden, Constitution becomes the future decision of this current case. So the past all of a sudden becomes, overfloods our contemporary events. So when I say subject, I had no problems to decipher where in the hell did we get the modern subject. I can give you argument for argument between Democritus and Aristotle concerning parts and wholes. Well, it's a big debate. And I can show you where we get a modern subject. Okay? So it's a debate, a dialogue between giants who had a problem and resolved that problem in one way. So we have a modern subject. So that subject becomes part of our history. But then Husserlian phenomenology raises a question, and Sebom did that and the others. So I am converging as a subject into the historical tradition that was created by great arguments. So I'm not independent. But then the convergence of me into the horizon poses a question. So what is the awareness that sees the horizon and me as this subject converging into it? What is the awareness that allows me to say that I can see the whole horizon before I get converged into it, or while I'm getting converged? So there's that in-between difference, the transcendental difference that Thomas Sebom called in this, one of his major works. So now this transcendental difference doesn't belong to anything, but it is a reflection between the horizon of our tradition. You know, we talk about laws and we talk about democracy, autocracy, and all of that. And me, or whatever, is recognizing that horizon and its limits. Tradition has a limit. So what is the limit of this horizon? Because there are other traditions having different horizons. Okay? You mentioned other traditions, no question. Whether it's, you know, Chen and Zen. So now, how do we recognize, and that's the controversy between Habermas and what are the limits of the variation of possibilities in the horizon? What you say, beyond this you cannot step. And if I recognize the limit, I am already recognizing a position beyond that limit. And that's non-positional. And that's transcendental. So the transcendental level is not mine. It's the very phenomena which I disclose, not me as the subject. Anyone can disclose. The argument between Gadamer and Habermas, trying to disclose the limits. You know, you can analyze Habermas, his feelings, his sociology, and all of that. That won't do any good. They're already at that level which deals with limits. And if I know all the variations of all the possible disciplines of a tradition reflectively, and then I know what that tradition does not allow, no matter what variants I introduce, then I know the limit of the horizon. So that is, at that level, I'm no longer within that tradition. My reflections are saying, I see the limit. So now that's Husserl's transcendental. No matter, that's why, you know, that self, the reflecting self, is not an ego. That's gone. Okay. Ego is one moment in my society. I can have many egos, but my students and, well, people I talk to some places in the world, well, who were you when you were a child? Okay, I was a barefooted peasant child, okay, chasing ducks. And well, when you were at that age, there were many egos identifiable, but my awareness and the questioner who asks, my awareness of all of them doesn't belong to any of them. That awareness is not my personal one ego. So that's the transcendental question. Now, the question of the reflecting subject, up till now, that dualism has missed the Chen, has missed the world. You talk about this emergence, upsurgence. Nothing, and let's look at arts. Nothing is independent. You know, this figure, this human portrait, or this forest, nice painting, because none of them are complete. None of them. So we have a phenomena pervading them, which allow this upsurgence, but never completely. Okay, so just to use an example, aesthetics. There's a difference between art and aesthetics. Art depicts something. Aesthetics depicts the dimensions out of which the something emerges. Okay. Borges talks about that stuff a lot, but let's take Van Gogh. Okay. He was asked, why are you keep painting the wheat fields? Van Gogh says, I'm not painting wheat fields. But that's what you're trying to do. He says, no. I am painting the golden tone of the day, the golden tone of the tone, audio, the day, the gold, visual, from which the wheat fields emerge and appear in this specific tonality. Those dimensions out of which the wheat fields emerge, never completely, are not things. They're cosmic. The cosmic lights, the cosmic shades, the cosmic resonances from which things emerge. But those dimensions, the Greeks called it apeiron, okay? They're unlimited, out of which things emerge into which, but they don't sink into nothingness, okay? It's like aurora borealis, okay? Things are illuminated, those lights are not things, but out of which you can see, you know, the trees and things like that in that particular shade. So there are cosmic dimensions, the exploding galaxies, which are illuminated in various shadings. The illumination is not a thing, but they are the phenomena out of which these things show up. So in passive synthesis, in Husserlian sense, a second volume of ideas, no, in passive synthesis, the second volume is kinesthetic. We always have a question, like in passive synthesis. Well, I'm walking across the street and there is a show in a window and there are figures. Is it a human or is it a mannequin? I come closer. Now, notice, coming closer is a phenomenon that suddenly shifts. Aha, that looks like mannequin because it didn't move. But I moved closer, it moved. Did it move because I moved closer, or did it move by itself? Maybe it's human and not a mannequin. I'm passively synthesizing without asking any questions. In light of, you see, what do we talk about size? Size is a movement. I come closer, the thing looks bigger. I come very close, it looks gigantic. The bush is the size of the building has a difference. Okay. So we have to introduce movement, okay, as passive synthesis.
Let me ask a little mini question here. If the constitutive process of passive synthesis varies from structure to structure, magic, mythic, perspective, if that is the case, then would the process of reflection be different?
Yeah, the process of reflection is has two dimensions, at least two dimensions. I can fix on something, okay, and I'm reflecting on that, nothing else. But when I compare, I make that something into comparative flux. Well, it's not that, it's not that, that's the same framework, but it doesn't look like the same framework. And so we have now a question of synthesis, because when we say comparison, we are also looking for and have a vision of what is common. Otherwise, there's no comparison. So I have a text in Spanish. Formas para comprender las civilizaciones. It includes that problematic. Okay.
So if we then extend this up into what the Benthamites, would call some kind of pragmatism or something, or go with Habermas, this reflexivity, the reflection, there's the reflexivity, which is very primordial.
Mm-hmm.
But if you extend it into the range of ideology, then we get into things like justice.
Yeah.
And this burgeoning notion of the integral, some people have said, well, this will lead to, a more ecological justice, a world of more ecological justice or something like this. But I'm not sure that's necessarily the case.
Well,
because the reflection, but I'll let you finish your thought.
Yeah. When you say include ecological, Levinas, he was not an ecologist. He was not ethical at all. But you see, by now we disclosed that we belong in this world, and that Brahman, Atman, the cosmic breath, and my minimal breath interchange, and we cannot be one without the other. So now we know, using that metaphor, that Amazon is my lungs. Okay, I cannot breathe without Amazon breathing. Here we have a common framework. The trees breathe in and breathe out, and I breathe in without Amazon, without other forests. I don't breathe. I'm part of the breath. Okay? I'm integral to it. I can't leave. Oh, I'm going to go to Mars and it's like the funniest thing. Well, Budweiser is funding a Mars expedition, and it plans to make beer there because it couldn't make good beer here, although there's no water. So they sand beer. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we cannot leave the world. Okay. So what we're discussing is the integral from within the world. Yeah, we have a vision, the science has visions, okay, and that integrates various experiments, examples, and we haven't left the world. Our awareness is not outside my perspective on the universe. So the universe is a big thing, and I'm standing there outside and have a perspective nonsense. My take on the universe, come on.
With regret, I have to call this session to a close. Eric, I thank you very much for continuing our dialogue with these questions. We could go on for the next 5 hours and barely scratched the surface. Al, I thank you very much for your thoughtful answers. And Cassia, I appreciate the heart that has been popping up on your screen as you really find these things meaningful. As we consider the theme for future conferences, I think that it's important for all of us to jot these things down and say, I want to talk more about this, not just in my own paper, but let's think about next year's conference, the conference after that. So please continue to be a part of this dialogue. They say that one of the mistakes that Hollywood makes is that they let shows go on too long, and that it's better to end the series at its high point. I feel like I'm doing that right now. So anyway, once again, Eric Kramer, I thank you very much. Al Mickunas, thank you very much. And I want to turn over to our last speaker of today's joint block. And this is Glenn Aparicio Parry. Glenn joined us, I believe, first in 2012 in Monterey, when we were at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, a conference that was actually organized by, I believe, John Dodson and Elaine C., who has lowered her own standards to marry Eric Kramer. So, and Glenn has been a part of this circle ever since. Glenn is the author of at least 2 marvelous, really wonderful books, Original Thinking and the more recent Original Politics, which I'm not going to say much about because that's what Glenn's here to talk about. But what I will say is that Glenn masterfully incorporates Gebserian thought into a much broader basket of things that he talks about. And so with no further ado, I turn the floor to my friend Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Algis. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Love your hat.
What's that?
Love your hat.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to
Thank
steal
you,
it.
hat. I'll keep it under my hat. I don't know. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. It's good to listen and be fed with such nourishment. Thank you so much. And I want to begin with gratitude. And thank you, Algis, for saying that about Dostoevsky, saying that what really is the issue is profound ungratefulness. So thank you. I love to be grateful, so that's where I will begin. Ah, beloved Creator, originating, creating, ursprunging, if you pardon my Germlish, ursprunging, ever creating, ever changing, ever formed, formless, and fluxing. Thank you, beloved Creator, for the great gift of life. Thank you, Creator, for the starlight. Thank you, Creator, for the light from our sun. Thank you for the light in our solar plexus. Thank you, Creator, for the light of consciousness that can penetrate all things. Thank you for that light. Thank you for the breathing aware air, the prana, the pneuma, the spiritus, the ruach, the air, the medium of life moving through the air. Thank you, Creator. Thank you for the waters everywhere, the waters above the sky, in outer space, the waters held in the clouds, the waters under the earth, the waters in the rivers, streams, lakes, and oceans, the water in our heart that connects with the heartbeat of nature. Thank you, Creator, for the water that we live with. Thank you for our immersion. Thank you for understanding that we are water, that water is life. Thank you, Creator. And thank you, Creator, for Pachamama, Mother Earth, that we're born from, that we return to. Thank you for the earth. Thank you for all the creatures on the earth, all the critters, the littlest ones, the invisible ones, the ones, the billions of ones we pick up in one handful of soil. Thank you for those microorganisms. Thank you for those germs that germinate, that give us life. Thank you for the bacteria. Thank you for the mushrooms and their web of interconnection, the mycelium web. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you also for the viruses. The viruses are what's spurring evolution. Thank you, even as we as humans are now understanding that we're out of balance with the viruses. And when we're out of balance, that can bring sickness or death to us. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for including the viruses as part of life. Thank you. Thank you, Creator. Thank you for all the critters on the earth, from the bear, the fox, the bobcat, the elk, the deer. Thank you for the bear now that teaches us to go within with wisdom. Thank you for all that there is. Thank you for this group, this amazing group, this group of profound depth, profound intelligence, but profound sincerity. Profound sincerity, the ability to listen, like Mike Purdy, who demonstrates that to us and holds that space. Thank you for that beautiful ability to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and to grow and become more and more integral, more and more, whatever it is that we are becoming. Thank you for that openness to the process. Aho mitaki yasin. Thank you, group. When I wrote the book Original Thinking, I did a little research, and I found out that the origin of the word thinking is thanking, and the origin of the word thinking is thanking in at least 7 languages: English, French, Dutch, Norse, Frisian, German, and Old Saxon. And I wondered, why would that be? Why would the origin of the word thinking be thanking? And all I could imagine is that originally all our thoughts were prayers. Originally, all our thoughts connected us with creation. Originally, all our thoughts brought us closer to the whole. And it's only over time that we have moved so that our thinking processes are now more, they tend to separate ourselves from what is actually unfolding. But if we can come back and remember that we are part of the whole, remember deep within us that we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. The bones in our body are like the bones of the rocks of the earth, and when the tides go in and out, that's like our lungs going in and out. These are just things that everybody understood, but has been kind of passed by. When we remember that, things can be good. I also wrote the book Original Thinking because credit goes to Leroy Little Bear, Blackfoot Elder. I had convened a dialogue between Western scientists and indigenous elders, and Leroy Little Bear in 1999 asked the question, seemingly simple question, but not really, is it possible to have an original thought? And when he asked that question, the very interesting thing happened, which is that almost all the Western people in the room tried to think of something new, as in never been said before, never been done before, which is generally a futile exercise. Whereas, and there were some Westerners like Lee Nichol, who was the editor of David Bohm, who did not take it that way. But mostly Westerners tried to think of something new that had never been said before or done before. And the indigenous people took the question completely differently, as an invitation to connect to origin as a place. And it was sometime later that I realized that was the source of the divergence between indigenous and Western thinking. for Western cosmology, as Algis was going into somewhat, it's really it's all about time. It's not about place at all, really. If you ask a Western cosmologist about the origin of the universe, they will immediately default to time. They'll talk about 13.8 billion years ago. And the only thing they mention about place is that everything was in a quantum singularity, in this little tiny place. That's the theory anyway. And it could be any place. The place is unimportant. Where if you asked, let's say you ask a Hopi elder about the origin of the cosmos, or the origin of his place in the cosmos, he would take you to a very specific place. He would take you to the confluence of the Little Colorado River and the Big Colorado River. He would take you to the Sipapu. He would take you to the place of emergence. And that's where everything matters for indigenous peoples. I appreciated what Algis was saying about place never being quite the same. That's very true for indigenous peoples, would very much agree with that. And it's often a mistake when Western scientists have looked at indigenous cultures to think of them as static, when actually indigenous cultures are very keenly aware of the ecosystemic changes in a given place. So if you ask Leroy Littlebear, for instance, who writes a beautiful preface to Gregory Cajete's Native Science, he'll be speaking, he will say that Native people would never speak about the laws of nature. They would only keenly observe what has happened up until this time, and they would never expect that it will actually happen exactly the same way. And it never does. So they watch it really closely. Now, the difference between thinking in terms of origin as a place or origin as a divergence seems to me incredibly important, because so much of Western history is about a divergence from place. And that, if I wasn't confined to this box here on the Zoom, I would stand up and start, I would take a few steps. Maybe I can still do it. I don't know. But, no, you can't see me, but you take a step from one place to another. And we tend to call that progress. And as Gebser would say, that's progress can be confused, or distance from the origin can be confused with progress. And that's really, really important, because when you're indigenous to a particular piece of land and you're noticing keenly the ecosystemic changes around that land, you're basically operating in concentric circles around what is happening in a particular place. And you're very keenly aware of that. But once you shift and you take, and you suppose that you can take knowledge from one place to the other, that's the beginning of abstract knowledge. And it seems to me also the seed of colonization. It's the seed of colonization because we take one idea, we move it to another place, and we suppose that our ideas are superior to the people who have lived in a particular place. And to just to give a humorous example about that, I just came back from South Dakota, Wyoming, and Colorado, and I could say the same thing there as I can say in New Mexico, where I am now. But let's say you asked a New Mexico child on a quiz the question, what is a subway? What is a subway? Now, if they answer a sandwich, they're generally marked as wrong. They'll say, that's wrong. No. A subway is an underground train. But why is that? Because in New Mexico, a subway is a sandwich. The same in South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, almost every place in the United States, except for New York, Los Angeles, a few places, there's no subways. It's the way that educators that be will name it. So this makes a big difference because now we're imposing abstract knowledge. Okay, now Dave expected me to talk more about, and I still am, Dave, about the influence of Native America on the founding of this nation, which is the central premise of the book, Original Politics. And I do want to speak about that, but I want to speak about it in the context of what we've been speaking about today, because the influence of Native America on the founding of the United States is influence that's still there. That's not from the past. That's not something only from the past. It's something that profoundly affects the present. So, to say this succinctly, the influence on the founding of the United States is so profound that it's Chief Conestoga, after Ben Franklin as Indian ambassador to the Iroquois or Haudenosaunee Nation, Ben Franklin is asked to do that to form a military alliance with the Iroquois because they controlled the Hudson River Valley, which is a very powerful area. And even though the Haudenosaunee had formed a peaceful pact as long ago as 1132 AD, they, in fact, were still a very strong military power. And so that's why it was incumbent upon our mother country asked Ben Franklin to form a military alliance with the Iroquois in the French and Indian Wars. And what happened though was very changed the course of history, because Ben Franklin forms a strong friendship with Chief Conestoga, the Onondaga chief. And of course, Ben Franklin had been printing treaties for many years before this ever happens. And he even lost his assembly job at the Pennsylvania Assembly because he took the side of the Indians too much. So Ben Franklin has an affection for Indian philosophy. And it's Chief Conestoga who says to the colonists on July 4th, 1744, exactly 32 years before the Declaration of Independence, he gives them the idea to unite. He says, unite, become like us, a strong confederacy, like the five fingers of one hand. And so they unite. They unite. Hold on one second. Yeah. And when that happens, it sets something in motion. It sets something in motion. It takes 32 years, but eventually the colonists take this suggestion of Chief Conestoga. They do unite as colonies instead of being 7 disparate governments. And Ben Franklin actually is the author of the Articles of Confederation. He's the main author of the Articles of Confederation, which is the true founding document of the United States. For some strange reason in history, we tend to be taught there's the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and then the Constitution in 1789 is ratified as if nothing happened in between. Well, something did happen in between. The Articles of Confederation, and France and Morocco recognized the United States as a country in 1781. And so for 8 years, the Articles of Confederation is the prevailing document in the land. And more important than any of that, I mean, the fact is the Articles of Confederation are modeled very closely after the Iroquois Law of Peace, including having a Grand Council that was 50 for the Iroquois and was 48 in the Articles of Confederation. But the biggest influence was actually the concepts of liberty, equality, and natural rights. Now, I would contend that that was the biggest influence on the founding fathers, the biggest influence. Of course, they were influenced by other forces as well, including the Masons, and they were influenced by ancient Greek democratic history. But they had before them a living example of true egalitarian cultures. That's what they brought in. That's the most profound effect they had. And that is still working its way through all of American politics. I mean, the reason why libertarians are still have some voice in American politics is because Native Americans didn't have any laws, they didn't have any courts, they didn't have any judges, and yet they still had a coherent society. The reason why progressives have a strong voice, perhaps, in American society is that they are the champions of inclusivity. I would say that the greatest gift that Native America gave to this land, to this country, was a sacred vision of unity in diversity. A sacred vision of unity in diversity. It's not a dissimilar vision to something that Sri Aurobindo had, or that Gebser had. So those ancestors have this similar vision of unity in diversity, of really understanding the whole and accepting the whole. That is a beautiful vision. And when we don't accept the whole, when we see others, as Algis was saying, when we see others, when we see liberals or conservatives as other, as opposed to our philosophy, what tends to happen, as William Irwin Thompson noted brilliantly, is that we become what we hate. We become what we hate. So over time, that's why Republican Party and Democratic Party, they're dancing with each other on the dance floor, and before they know it, they're on a different place on the dance floor, completely different from where they started. And they do that because they are unaware of their true core, and they're just reacting to the other. This nation is a hybrid of Native America and Euro America in its origins, and still today, although today it has a tremendous influx from so many different forces, which has just gone to further the original vision of unity and diversity. This nation has its origins in peoples, indigenous peoples, who received their vision directly from the land, who were very grateful for the gift of life, who saw the natural world as a blessing, not as something to overcome. And this history that we have in this land is living. It's a living history. And everybody living in this land has the opportunity to indigenize to the land as a verb. It's not about making a dichotomy between indigenous peoples and the peoples living here now, because we all need to indigenize as a verb. And even though this land has been, right now, the politics of this nation is as divisive as it ever has been, at least since the 1850s, I do hold out a lot of hope. I do hold out a lot of hope because of people like everyone in this group, the Gebserians that understand that origin is alive, Gebserians that understand that the archaic, the magical, the mythical, the mental, all of this is happening at the same time. And hopefully also this group understands also, as Marcellus Bearhart taught, that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the resolution of conflict with love, with love. So if we can be more loving to each other, that's really where the key is. And in fact, my next book actually is going to be called Original Love. And if you want to know about that, you should talk to my wife, Tomoko, because she's the one who told me that I was going to write that book. And then a year later, a woman from Taos said the same thing. She stopped herself in the middle of a sentence, says, "You're going to write a book called Original Love." I said, okay, well, when that happens, it's a calling that I will accept. I won't leave it on the answering machine. And I have started that book, and I will continue it. That's all I have to say, really. I just want to bring love and appreciation of this group and incredible intellects and also hearts and minds that are gathered here. And may you always be blessed and always be whole. Aho, mitakuye-san. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Glenn. I love you, brother. I really do.
Thank
I want to thank everybody for marvelous contributions today. For those of you joining us for the first time this year, imagine how much more intense this is when we're all in the same room all day for 3 days straight. It's really something else, and I personally miss it quite a bit. I hope that very, very soon we'll be able to resume our personal interactions, our in-person interactions. But once again, I want to thank everybody for joining us in today's session, which was hearing and responding to Algis Mickunas. And we want to thank Algis for all of his contributions over the decades to Gebser Scholarship and to this society. We want to thank Mike Parry for being, as Eric Kramer said, a pillar that we've all depended upon for these many years, and for his work in propagating Gebser Scholarship. I want to thank Eric Kramer for all of the work that he's done, including being my mentor, which makes Algis somewhat responsible for me. I'm sorry about that. And I want to thank everybody for contributing their questions. Those questions that we weren't able to get to, I actually already sent to Algis and Mike. So when I get an answer back from the two of them, I will forward those answers to the folks who asked them. And I want to thank Glenn for wrapping up our joint session today with love. So at this point, this concludes our session today. Before I turn it over to Jeremy, I want to remind you that we meet next week, same bat time, same bat channel, and we will have some more extraordinary presentations and also one from me. So please put that on your calendar and join us next week. But I thank you, and I thank all of you for putting up with my necessity to be the timekeeper today. Every single session could have gone longer. It is an unenviable task to be the human clock at a Gebser conference. But I thank you all very, very much for your grace. And Jeremy, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Glenn, and thank you, everyone. I just fantastic day. I was saying earlier, I learned so much actually today, sitting here from Algis, from Eric, Dave, Mike. It's an honor to be here with you, and I hope that we can do this in person sooner than later. As Dave was just saying, our in-person gatherings are really something. So I really do hope you can join us for that maybe next year. So a few notes, as we did last week, we're going to be having a Cosmo Local gathering portion of the conference. And what that is essentially, as we've been saying, is self-organized chapters doing their own presentations, performances, conversations, dialogues. So in just a couple of minutes, and I'll post a link for everybody here, I'll be hosting this one technically I'm in St. Pete, Florida, as you can see. So you can join me for that. I'm going to be having two presentations. One is with Henry Andrews presenting on Gravesian theory. That's Claire W. Graves and the ways of being. And Henry has a really fantastic and interesting reading of Graves that has some resonance with Gebser, and particularly the way in which Graves is talking about time. So if you missed that one with my group a couple weeks back, definitely check that out and join us. And then I'll be doing a short reading of a new essay coming out with a new anthology coming out called Mutations, Imagination, and Futurability. So if you want to join. And then I think Lisa and John, you're also offering this room in a little bit. Is that correct?
We can keep this open for about an hour after you know, if people want to just stay on and chat. But I would actually encourage people to go to yours.
And just for clarification, are we using the same Zoom link next week?
Yes.
Okay, so the same link that you all clicked on this morning, please make sure to click on it next week.
Great.
Can I say a word? One minor word. Algis, anyone in Gebser Society or anything else, whatever you want from me, I will be glad to share. Anything I have written or will write or think, anyone who wants to invite me to participate in any discussion, please don't be shy. Because I love to be at fault, to be corrected, okay? Because I'm just a little minor entity in the cosmic drama, and that drama is part of our life, and different lives have a different drama, and we can share. So anything you want.
I'll just, I may take you up on that. Thank you so much for that offering.
Anything you like. I have, whatever I have is yours. Free of charge. So I'm not a capitalist.
Jeremy, could you tell folks what's on tap for next Saturday, please?
Sure thing. Next Saturday, we have Dave speaking about the prison project with Gebser. I'm so excited to have Dave debut about that with the Gebser Society. And then we also have a panel discussion with Rudolf Hammerly and Aaron Cheek. Rudolf Hammerly is the president of the European Gebser Society and archivist and publisher of Gebser. And Aaron Cheek is also working on the Gebser project, which is a very exciting translation project that is in the works presently. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about the conference proceedings, and it's going to be fantastic. So please join us for that. And in the afternoon, if I could just get the schedule up here, we're also going to be hosting a kind of a poetry gathering, I believe. And I think John Dotson is convening that or organizing that for us. So there will be readings of Gebser's poetry, translated by Aaron Cheek, readings from Michael Love and Sabrina Dalla Valle. And then in the afternoon, I'm going to be announcing this. There will be a little bit more Cosmolocal gathering here from St. Pete. I had some really wonderful presentations that wanted to squeeze in. So I'll be sharing that information soon with you, Lisa, as I get the titles prepared.
And just jumping in, Michael Love is incarcerated at Folsom State Prison, and through a special arrangement okayed by the warden, Mr. Love will be joining us live. So that's a pretty extraordinary thing, and it took a whole lot of mountains to be moved to allow it to happen. So we will be time certain when it comes to Michael Love's presentation, but the same Folsom Prison that Johnny Cash made famous. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We'll have a produced poetic performance by Sabrina Dalla Valle, and then we'll see where the poetry goes from there next week. And then Cassia is going to present a video performance piece. Aaron will be reading his translations of Gebser's poetry. Aaron has been with us today. I don't know if he's still with us or not. I can't see everybody. But Aaron is, of course, joining us from New Zealand, where it's 20 hours different from California. So whatever time that, time. I said time. I don't know. I didn't mean to.
Convenient time, not time, convenient time.
Aaron's convenience. but with everyone else here and all around the world as we are experiencing our participation. If I believe Gebser loves that term, participating. Just say yes, Algis, and then I'll be happy. Participating. We are participating. How wonderful, how blessed. And thank you for your prayer. Glenn, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thanks to everyone here. How wonderful. This is a very different mode of Gebserian conferring, but I'm glad that we can do it. And yes, I've been pondering that maybe a format could be to again have like 3 weekends with 2 being Zoomed, and then culminating in a final weekend that everyone who can get together in a location, in place, could do so perhaps in New Mexico, but then also with a Zoom component there so that we can all be together, whatever our location. That's it.
All for New Mexico. I will happy to help. Jeremy, can I just ask a very practical question? So the next groups is it the same Zoom link for the?
It's not, and thank you, Glenn, for that reminder. It's a separate link that is right here. I'm posting it in the chat. It was also, if you still have the email that I sent out this morning and yesterday with all of the information, it's right in there towards the bottom of the schedule under the Cosmo Local Gathering. So separate Zoom link. And Glenn, you should also get it through my Mutations Patreon too. I pushed it out to
Okay.
folks. So all right. Well, see you for that. And thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Hola.
Sean. Thanks, Lisa, for hosting this Zoom event. And I'll see you on the Cosmo Local Gathering.
Have a wondrous life.